The power shall be mine in this episode of Battle Guides featuring Byron. Personally, Byron is one character I find really hard to use because he isn't always about winning turns, because it's really hard for him to win turns, which plays into the mechanic of his unique ability, which lets him technically live longer against certain types of characters. Now, Byron is clumsy, but if he does hit, it ends up dealing a lot of damage or gives him a huge advantage in the next turn. As such, Byron's a lot more opportunistic than other characters because he needs to make use of those opportunities because he can't make his own opportunities. As such, he has to wait for an opening in the opponent's defenses or game plan in order to take advantage of that. However, that means you're fumbling about for a few turns or beats until your opponent makes a mistake. In that sense, he reminds me of a clumsy juggernaut like Cadenza, but he doesn't have the reliable stun guard that Cadenza has. So, as with many characters from this flight on, Byron proves to be a big challenge if you're going to use him, especially if he's the first character you're going to use. So I suggest that you listen well to what's gonna come up next. Byron is a lich at Argent University who makes use of his powerful spells and devastating effects to keep opponents at bay while pelting them down with powerful spells. However, not all is fine and dandy for this dark arts user. You see, a lot of his attacks have minimum ranges, and that means awkward ranges. Not only that, but all of his effects require him to be at the specific range from the opponent when he uses them. And finally, most of the time, he's not fast enough to make use of many of his great styles. So that proves to be a problem as he fumbles about quite often. Byron's unique ability is the Bound Mask. Byron starts the game with 5 mask counters in his token pool. Now at the start of each beat, his life total becomes 3 times the number of mask counters he has, or 1 if he has no more. Whenever Byron is affected by a loss of life ability, his starting life the next beat gets reduced by 1 for each point of life loss taken, up to a minimum of 1. Now, the first time Byron takes any damage during the beat, he must discard a mask counter. Now, this unique ability makes Byron truly unique among most of the Devastation cast because it changes the way his life goes down. Most characters, well, would just lose the amount of life that they lose. But Byron technically almost always loses 3 life. So whether he gets hit by a really strong 8 power attack or a really strong 1 power attack, he still technically just lost the same amount of life regardless. However, one thing that this unique ability doesn't explicitly state is that Byron doesn't need to have 0 mask counters to die. As long as your HP becomes 0, you are still eliminated from the game. So for example, Byron only has 2 mask counters left and he has 6 life. If Cadenza were to hit him with a clockwork shot and deal 7 damage, Byron would still die even if he had 2 mask counters left, because all they really determine is how much life he's gonna go up to at the start of the beat. They don't determine anything else really. So in order to conserve your masks, it's an utmost priority to know Byron's cards well, because they are the only way he's avoiding damage. So let's move on to that. Let's start off with Heartless. It's a great mid-range card with awesome stats that allow you to use it almost anywhere as long as the range permits. The more important effect among these two here is the on damage effect, which allows Byron to gain Soak. Now in conjunction with the power +1, that's great as it allows you to mitigate damage. And as Byron, not taking damage is the goal. Now its Range-Reliant Effect is the odd hit effect that allows Byron to ignore Soak and make the opponent lose life equal to the amount of Soak they have. Now this is very niche as not a lot of characters have Soak. But if you use it well and use it wisely, it can prove to give Byron big gaps. Now in terms of good attack pairs, I almost always use this card with drives or grasps Because they're the faster ones of the bases, Phases on the other hand is one of Byron's few attacks with no minimum range, making it one of the best things he can do at melee range. Not only that, but it has +1 power, but it might be lacking in the speed department at +0 priority. Now, as with Heartless, the more important effect isn't range reliant. The on-hit effect allows Byron to not be hit this beat, and that is great. Now, the range-reliant effect, on the other hand, is on damage and activates at range 2. Now, this works great with a majority of Byron's styles because most of them, again, want Byron to be faster than the opponent. And by dealing damage with the power +1, you'll almost always have prio +4 after doing this attack. Now, as with the previous card, this card wants you to be fast. So you pair the fast bases with it. Grasp, again, for getting them into the right range, and Drives for getting you into the right range while dealing a bit more damage. Now we move on to my favorite Byron card, Soulless. Soulless is range +0, power +1, and priority -4. But it packs not only stun immunity, but soak equal to the number of mask counters you've lost, letting Byron have pseudo-immortality because it's so hard to get past Soak 5 most of the time. The range-reliant effect is actually the important one on this card. But it happens on reveal, so you don't have to be faster this time. Now, on reveal, an opponent at range 1 loses 2 life, and you gain +2 power. So technically, this card causes an extra 5 life worth of life gap, making this one of Byron's best melee range plays aside from Faceless. As an end of beat effect, if you didn't already lose a mask now. Byron will lose a mask whether he likes it or not. So this attack's more used to gain an advantage on your opponent. It's your big explosion style. However, personally, I use this attack offensively. I almost always dash, then do Soulless Shot the next turn. Use a Soulless Shot or a Soulless Smoke in melee range, and you're pretty much almost always guaranteed 8 damage. Breathless is one of those attacks that just has awkward range. Range +3 to 4, power +0, and priority +0 means that this attack is not the fastest, not the strongest, and definitely not the one with the best hit confirmed. However, it does have a saving grace in the start of beat effect that allows Byron to teleport to any space behind his opponent, making this card absolutely important if you have been cornered by your opponent. Now, the range-reliant effect is okay. As with the majority of his other styles, this basically allows Byron to potentially dodge your opponent's damage, or make your opponent deal 0 damage, which in effect allows Byron to not lose a mask counter. Now, for great attack pairs, I again suggest using Grasp on it, again for the range tricks, or you can use a Strike, because strikes deal a lot of damage to compensate for this attack's +0 power. Deathless is a mid to long range style that has range +1 to 3, power +1, but priority -1. Now, it has a passive effect that allows Byron to not take damage beyond 1. And most people would say, wow, that's great, but remember, Byron's unique ability makes it so that 1 damage is always equal to a mask counter loss. So it's still pretty much the same thing. But what does that mean for Byron? It means that Byron can now have Stun Guard Infinity on a shot. It also means that he has Stun Guard Infinity on his strike. Now, the range-reliant effect is okay, allowing Byron to move the opponent to any space on the board. However, it's slow. That means that all that effect is good for is for positioning. And mind you, that is still pretty good because, again, it combos into a lot of Byron's other effects. Now, in terms of great attack pairs, again, like I said, it goes great with anything with Stun Guard. So shots and strikes are the way to go. And finally, we'll move on to Byron's unique base, Smoke. Smoke is pretty standard. It's range 1 to 5, power 3, priority 3. Yes, I called range 1 to 5 standard because with Byron, almost all of your attacks are pretty much along that range. However, it does have a special property stating that you ignore range modifiers on your styles, meaning that no matter what you pair with this attack, its range will always be 1 to 5. Now that could be a good or bad thing. It's a good thing because it means you don't have to worry about the minimum range. It's a bad thing because your opponent might be skirting at range 6. Not only that, but it has an on-hit effect that allows you to move the opponent one space, similar to Grasp. Now, I think this is a great place to explain why Grasp and Smoke are so good on Byron. You see, a majority of his range-reliant effects happen on hit, and since the movement on Grasp and Smoke are also on hit, that means that Byron can choose the order of effects. Now, for example, your range-reliant effect needs your opponent to be at range 4, and your opponent is only at range 3. When you can do the on-hit effect of Grasp or Smoke, move the opponent to range 4, then activate the range-reliant effect that's at range 4. But wait, what if he's already at range 4? Can I still use Grasp and Smoke? Absolutely, because again, remember that you picked the order of effects. Byron's two overdrive finishers are Soul Trap and Soul Gate. Soul Trap is a mid-range, high-power, low-priority but stun-immune overdrive finisher that allows Byron to reclaim a mask. Now, this attack is great because it allows Byron to not only deal a lot of damage, but at the same time, gain a mask back. Since this attack is slow, more often than not your opponent will hit you, making you lose a mask. But due to this attack's effect, you gain a mask in the process, leaving you technically without a life loss at all, while dealing 7 damage to your opponent at range 1 to 3, which proves completely useful as it allows you to mitigate the fact that a majority of your styles have minimum ranges. On the other hand, Soul Gate is a awkwardly ranged overdrive finisher that has 0 priority, no stun immunity, but deals 25 damage. Now, this overdrive finisher has a passive effect that allows Byron to dodge opponents who did not move this beat. What does this mean for Byron? Well, obviously this attack has awkward range being 3 to 4, but also it allows Byron to basically come back and one-shot almost the entire cast of BattleCON. But other than that, it doesn't really do much in terms of attrition or other effects. Now, quite frankly, looking at all of your options for your special action, Byron might want to use Soul Trap more often. Not only does it have a bigger window of opportunity for you to use, it also has great effective range, stun immunity, and quite frankly, it deals a lot of damage for what it does. So, a Byron's advanced strategy should almost always involve avoiding taking damage. What does that mean? A majority of Byron's styles allow him to have some sort of way to avoid damage, such as Heartless giving you soak, or Faceless giving you priority during the next turn, or Deathless allowing you to move your opponent to any space on the board. All of these effects contribute in some way to allow Byron to dodge the opponent's attack, or at least mitigate the amount of damage that opponent will deal, hopefully making it 0. Use these to your advantage and take advantage of them as much as you can, because you want to preserve as much of your life as possible. Aside from that, realize that you're awkward. You're just awkward. You're not like a lot of brawler type characters, and you don't string attacks together in a very comfortable fashion. In fact, while you're playing Byron, you might be thinking that you're just throwing wild swings around, and quite frankly, that is what you do. You have a lot of options that don't really do things the way you want them to, but if your opponent makes a mistake, or if you find an opening at the right time and you connect with one of your options, it turns into a great advantage for you. And that's the thing with Byron, is you lose a lot, but when you win by so much. You're just trying to survive because you are a clumsy character. As such, you just have to somehow survive. And that comes with knowing your opponent's intentions and knowing what he's going to do and mastery of which bases beat what. Because as Byron, bases are really important, as you can't always rely on your styles because, again, the opponent can, and most oftentimes, if they're not a juggernaut, will be faster than you. Now in terms of attack pairs and combos, here are a few that I find absolutely useful when using Byron. Number 1, most of all, I absolutely love doing Breathless Dash. Now it might seem counterintuitive, wait, why aren't you attacking? You're doing Breathless. Well, Breathless Dash is actually a good opening move, allowing Byron to dash past the opponent on beat 1. But aside from that, this attack is pretty useful if your opponent is the one who's near the corner. Because Breathless has awkward range, and it's really hard to pair with anything among the base set. So why not just ignore that awkward range and make use of its greatest assets, which is the start of beat effect. This attack works extremely well with the next one, which is Soulless Shot. Soulless Shot is my favorite attack pair on Byron because not only does it give you free 2 damage, technically, at reveal phase, which is nearly impossible to dodge without a special action or some other crazy thing like that, but it also potentially allows Byron to deal 6 more damage after that, which is monstrously crazy. Remember, you get more soak the more masks you have lost. So this proves to be a great early game way of dealing damage as well as a great late game way of preserving your little health bar. And finally, we have Deathless Strike, which is a pretty decent attack that has 2 to 4 range, 5 power, and 2 priority with Stun Guard 5, and the passive that states that you can't take more than 1 damage this turn. This basically gives Byron stun immunity, which is invaluable in many cases. Not only that, but it deals 5 damage, which is technically 1/4 of your opponent's HP. And that pretty much does it for this episode of Battle Guides featuring Byron. Now if you're planning to take our deadly Lich to the battlefield, here are a few last-minute tips. Number 1. You don't always have to activate your Range-Reliant Effect. You see, on a majority of his styles, these effects are absolutely devastating and monstrous. But they're not the only effects on the cards. So, it's not your number 1 priority to make use of these effects. And it's usually your number 1 priority to just gain the best positioning possible. However, if the opportunity presents itself, take it. Because that's what Byron's all about. Taking opportunities when you see them. He's not about making plays. He's about taking plays when they're chucked to him. Which leads us to number 2. It's all about taking the right opportunities. You see, Byron again does not make plays. He just takes them when they come. However, not all of those plays might be a good thing for you. Because again, Byron is awkward and he doesn't have a lot of options. Which means that if he doesn't have specific cards, he has no way of dealing with specific opponent attacks. So what does this mean for Byron? Take opportunities, but not when it's too risky. Number 3. Don't mind the masks too much. As with many characters, taking damage is not good. And for Byron, losing mask is technically taking damage, which is not good. But there are a few exceptions, and one of them is trading. When you're Byron, trading 1 mask might seem like a lot because you only have 5, but actually it makes you a really decent trader in terms of using attacks like Strike or Shot. Because your opponent only deals 3 damage most of the time, you almost always trade positively because all of your attacks technically have power +1 on them. Which means that you'll be dealing at least 4 every time you hit. So as Byron, if you can trade, do so. And now moving on to my final thoughts. Byron is one of those characters that's really hard to use and takes some time getting used to. To be honest, I took quite a while to understand how he should generally play. And I'm free to admit that the way I'm telling you to play him in this video might not be the best way. So I challenge all of you out there, find a better way to play him than I did. Because my way of playing him mostly just involves dashing around the opponent and then playing soulless whenever it's up. It's effective, it works most of the time, but against faster characters, it's really hard to do anything else. So if you guys find a better way to play Byron, I challenge all of you to say something in the comments, or send me some messages, or send me an email at my email address, which I will link in the description below, for you to send me emails about that. Or if you guys want to tell me anything or give me some suggestions, put them in the comments or send me an email. Now, if this video got any of you guys interested in BattleCON, Devastation of the Indines, or War of the Indines, I highly suggest you check out Level 99 games down there. They have other awesome games which aren't fighting based. Some of them are story based and some of them are role-playing based. And that pretty much does it for this episode of Battle Guides. Thank you so much for watching. Good night, World of Indines. Good night.